Hi, good afternoon, and welcome. I'm Alex Smith from XpoNorth, and a warm welcome to the third session in our Story and Design series. Today, we're going to be looking at the world of brand licensing and commercial partnerships. We're going to try and cover as much ground as we can. And just before I ask our guests to introduce themselves, I'm just going to go through a quick piece of housekeeping. If anyone wants to ask a question during the seminar, if you could please pop it into the Q&A section, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom interface, and I'll put that question to our speakers. I'm going to ask Billy if you could introduce yourself first, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, hi, I'm Billy. I run a company called Mojo Nation. We own a brand called Brands Untapped, and essentially our remit is that we look at the world of licensing and brand extensions and explore the sort of design process behind it, the creative strategy behind brand extensions, and cover them online. And we also host a series of events as well that dive into licensing. And I'm delighted to be here chatting to you today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Billy. And Ian, if I could just ask the same, if you could maybe just give a really short piece of background about yourself and maybe some of the companies you've worked with across your extensive career.
Yes, certainly. And like Billy, it's great to be able to join this session. So my name's Ian Downs, and I'm the founder and owner of a specialist intellectual property licensing agency called Start Licensing. We've been up and running in business for about 15, 16 years, but I've worked in licensing for over 30 years. And in that time, I've worked with a broad range of intellectual property owners, including people like Star Wars, all the way through to, I work very closely with DC Thompson, based in Dundee. So I've worked over the years on the Beano, and I now work on WULLIE and the Bruins, but I've also worked in the sports sector, heritage sector, and TV and film, really. So the common bond, I suppose, in my world is that I'm involved in marketing intellectual property on behalf of the rights owners.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ian. Appreciate that. So just what the format of today, what I'm going to do is the guys are going to present an overview of, I guess, the licensing landscape and some of the opportunities and practical examples that they've been involved in. Again, if you have any questions as the guys are zipping through the presentations, please do pop them in that chat box, and we'll come to them. Billy, I'm going to bring you in first. I guess you're going to talk a little bit about, or give our audience an overview of the brand licensing landscape, really.
Absolutely, yeah. So what I want to do is just talk you guys through what we mean by brand licensing, brand extensions, why it's a very creative, exciting space, what sort of products we're talking about, and sort of highlight the fact that sort of lots of different companies of all different shapes and sizes and disciplines are now fully involved in brand licensing. So what do we mean by brand extensions? They span all different types of categories. Some are listed there: toys, games, apparel, publishing, food and drink, art, homewares, and we're going to explore some of those today. So yeah, toys. So again, this is a category most people can be very familiar with. Here's a quick example of a recent preschool line with Tomy around Jurassic Park. And in terms of what we mean by toys in this space, it's often, this is a perfect example of the sort of thing you might see more often than not. So it's a big kids property. So in this case, a sort of animated show called Bluey. And then you get a company like Moose Toys in this case, who takes the master toy rights to go and create the toys for that program. So in this case, a ultimate caravan adventure playset. But what I also wanted to get across is that this space in particular is becoming very creative in terms of the sorts of brands that can live in toys. So here's a recent partnership that was formed between the Van Gogh Museum and Playmobil. They've actually done a whole line of these that bring Van Gogh to life in that sort of Playmobil style. So again, as you can see, this is most people on paper wouldn't necessarily look at Van Gogh and think that's a toy brand right there waiting to happen. But there are smart, creative means of bringing these sort of properties to life. Same as well with this line from Mattel. They do a Little People's line, and they've done a Run DMC collection as part of that. They've done a lot of license deals with famous singers and bands. So again, another example similar to Van Gogh of a slightly left field partnership there. Board games is another huge category for licensing, and actually in recent years, you know, go back a few decades and licensed board games maybe had a bit of a bad rap, where you get a few bits of artwork from a brand on a game that isn't really too intertwined with what the brand's all about. That's very much not the case anymore. This is actually a steal from the Jaws board game from Ravensburger. It's a very good game if anyone's a fan of Jaws. This might be the sort of thing you expect when it comes to board games. So this is a collaboration between Hasbro and Universal around Minions. So the nice thing about this is that even with a lot of what Monopoly's doing is, you know, in the past, their licensed launches have involved, again, artwork around a Monopoly board, but increasingly we're seeing Monopoly being twisted and pulled and pushed in different directions to fully represent a brand. As you can see with this Minions version, it's not quite the Monopoly that people remember, and there's this physical toy in the middle that you use as well. Other recent board game partnerships and interesting board game deals. Netflix has teamed with Spin Master to turn a load of their shows into board games. And actually there's been this game, which is called Trending Now, which is just a game based on Netflix itself. The icons that you log into Netflix with are actually the playing pieces. And then there's a party game about the sorts of content and shows that you would access on Netflix itself. It's not just film and TV shows that are getting the board game treatment these days. This is a recent game based on the song Summertime by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. And it's from a games company called WizKids. So again, it's a card game that takes the vibe of that song, some of the things that happen in that song, and they've turned it into a very, it's done really well, very successful card game in the States. Big G Creative has teamed with Kraft Heinz on a line of games that take their popular condiments and bring them into the board game space. So again, very left field, but it's done in an authentic way. They've taken what people know most about the brand, the shape of the bottle, stuff like that, and they've created a fun dice game around Heinz tomato ketchup. Moving outside of toys and games, so we've got apparel. So this is a deal between Hype and Sesame Street. So you'd be very familiar with this, I imagine. But again, from a design point of view, there's really interesting stuff being done in the apparel space with brands. So this has literally got announced on Friday as part of Netflix's Stranger Things Day. But again, what they've done is, rather than necessarily just taking a character and putting it on a t-shirt or a jumper, they've Champion have released a line of sort of college-inspired apparel around Hawkins, which is the town in Stranger Things. And because of the upside down and some of the themes of the show, you know, they've got designs like this where it's upside down or mirrored or inverted. So smart things like that, where if people know the show, there's those little design touches that make it feel authentic to the brand in question. Again, as an example of the sorts of brands that are getting this treatment now, it isn't just your sort of entertainment properties or character properties. This is a partnership between the Louvre and Uniqlo. It's a part of a 4-year deal they have. And again, from the design touches, they've actually got the department that each piece you would usually find in a museum. They've put that department on the apparel. And then they've got a creative director in to actually do a sort of unique take on some of the artwork that's being transitioned into apparel. Footwear and brands is a huge space. We're seeing more and more interesting smart footwear collaborations. This is a partnership between Disney and Adidas. There's, you know, this image sort of shows off both sides of this. You have slightly more restrained designs where you have, like, the image on the left is one of the Monsters Inc. Launches they have, where you've got artwork for Sully and Mike on each shoe. You've got the light blue sort of on the inner sole there. And there's on the side, you can't really see it on that one, but on the side, they've just got their names. And there's little badges, pin badges right at the bottom of the laces that have their sort of jaws. The one on the right is sort of the other extreme, where you go slightly more out there with your designs. And that's what they've done, where they've got the sort of fur pattern of Sully all over the shoe. But again, perfect examples of quite smart, creative uses of taking the brand DNA and bringing it to life in another category. Vans recently teamed up with Warner Brothers to launch a line of footwear and apparel based on their horror properties. So again, this is a shoe based on the film It, where you've got the sort of creepy Pennywise face on the back of the shoe, and Your Float Too, which is a sort of iconic phrase, I suppose, from the film that's etched all over the shoe. But again, it's quite interesting that from a design point of view, it's not necessarily the obvious direction they're going. They're going quite smart, quite stylish, quite subtle in some cases. Which is the case there. Again, Polaroid is another brand that recently did a big apparel collection with Lacoste. They've chosen to go down the route with this one of taking the bars of color that make up the logo and bring that, and that's what they focus on the shoe. So I wanted to include that just as an example of there really are brands of all sorts of shapes and sizes, and brands that come from all different territories that are finding creative ways to extend into different categories like footwear. This is another one, probably more on the out there scale. A Regular Choice is a company. They do very sort of flamboyant footwear. They've done Star Wars high heels where there's a lightsaber as the heel, and it actually makes the lightsaber swooshing noise as you walk around. This is one from this year. They've teamed up with Sanrio for a Hello Kitty line, where one boot actually has a compartment for accessories. On the other one, you can actually dress Hello Kitty on the other boot. So again, an example of a company that really is going sort of to town when it comes to design and bringing brands to life in this space. Fragrances and cosmetics, there's loads of interesting stuff being done in this space. This shot is of ASOS and Crayola collaboration that was based around a beauty collection. So again, they've been quite smart in taking the look of the crayons, the look of the pencils and stuff like that, and just transitioning them into beauty. Van Gogh Museum, again, they teamed with Floral Street this year to launch a fragrance line that was inspired by his artwork. So again, the artwork features on the packaging. This one's called Sunflower Pop. So there's some notes, I think is what you'd call it, in terms of the scents and things that are inspired by the artwork. And again, on paper, Van Gogh fragrance might be a bit of a head scratcher, but they found a creative way that ensures the launch feels very authentic to Floral Street and their values, and also very authentic to the Van Gogh Museum. Another recent one that launched for Halloween, Kylie Cosmetics, the big sort of cosmetics company run by Kylie Jenner. Her favorite film is A Nightmare on Elm Street, apparently. And so she teamed up with Warner Brothers to launch this Nightmare on Elm Street inspired cosmetics collection that spans lip jellies and other things that I don't really know what they are. But yeah, they, again, smart design, left field. Not many people were expecting this when it came out. It got a lot of eyeballs. And I think it ticks a lot of boxes for both brands, in that you get a lot of exposure. They're well designed, so it doesn't feel just like a label slap. They've been quite smart in terms of how they bring A Nightmare on Elm Street to life in this space. And so it's sold really well, and it's been a boost for both Kylie Cosmetics and A Nightmare on Elm Street in terms of brand awareness and things like that. Okay, we're going to go into video games now. And here's a shot of a roller coaster tycoon sort of level that was introduced with Aardman and Shaun the Sheep. So roller coaster tycoon, obviously the famous roller coaster building game. So again, quite a smart, nice way of introducing a brand and their key elements into a video game setting. This space has been around forever. There's been licensed, video games almost as long as the medium's been around. But some recent examples you might be interested in. So here's a Hot Wheels Unleashed, which was from an Italian developer called Milestone. They teamed up with Mattel to bring Hot Wheels to life as a racing game. So that's something that is quite a straightforward partnership, and it's exactly where you think that brand would go. One that's slightly more left field is this recent partnership between Time Studios and Epic Games. This is Fortnite. And they actually, for Martin Luther King Day, they created a pop-up within the video game where Fortnite players could go and actually watch the famous speech and hang around in this environment and learn about Martin Luther King. So again, quite an interesting use of a video game format. And we're also seeing lots of artists. So Ariana Grande recently did a concert within Fortnite that you could attend. So again, these sort of the way brands are engaging with video games now is really smart in terms of, yes, you have official video game tie-ins. Yes, you have exclusive levels, but you're also having these sort of events within video games that are bringing brands to life in smart ways. Publishing, again, you get, you would have seen art books, I imagine, of famous films and famous animated films. These also now extend to things like licensed comics. So again, this is a Fortnite example. They brought Fortnite and Batman together for a DC comic, and that partnership then extended into the video game, and that you could actually, by buying the comic, you could then play as this character that is seen in the comic. So there's lots of these cross-industry collaborations that happen. And again, another one that I think is quite a fun one, Midsummer Murders. ITV teamed with Octopus Publishing to create a sort of choose your own adventure style Midsummer Murders novel, Could You Survive Midsummer? So I think that's a nice example of, there are lots of brands that haven't got lots of product out. Midsummer Murders, I think, is a good example of a brand that has a really dedicated following that love the show, but there isn't, masses and masses of product out there. This has been quite a smart, creative way of finding a way to tap into that audience in a way that still feels very authentic to Midsummer Murders. Also, we're seeing lots of board game brands. Embrace Publishing. So this is a partnership between Catan Studios, that owns Catan, or Settlers of Catan, if you played this game, and Welbeck Publishing. And they've decided to sort of transition the world of Catan into a puzzle book. So the terrain, the world of that game has been brought to life through a series of interesting puzzles and things like that. And it's the first actually of a line of books like this that are adapting different Asmodee games. I think Ticket to Ride, if you've ever played Ticket to Ride, that one has also got that treatment as well. So food and drink, again, there's lots of examples like this. Some of them aren't sort of overly flashy, but you would have come across them. This one is currently in stores now. I think this Choco Leibniz partnership with Bailey's, where you've got the biscuit that tastes slightly of Bailey's there. TfL, so Transport for London, partnered with Bimba on a line of booze that, again, you have the sort of artwork on the bottles is sort of representing different stations and things like that. So again, quite a smart, neat tie-up. Netflix and Johnnie Walker. So there is a show called La Casa Papel, which I think is Money Heist, it translates as. And so they created this special bottle, which if you hold a UV light over the bottle, you can actually see hidden messages and secret things. And so they've not just done it as a sheer sort of new label, tie it into the series coming back. They've actually made it an experience and made it feel very much like what the show's about. So that's an added sort of experience for anyone that wanted to buy that bottle and collect it. Beer, we've seen a huge uptake in sort of brands embracing the booze sector in terms of beer. So this is a recent partnership between Marmite and the Camden Town Brewery. Again, it's got lots of PR, obviously, as everything Marmite does get a lot of PR, but this one in particular got a lot of eyeballs, and people are excited about it and interested in it. And again, the brewery have been able to do a great bit of PR in terms of their brewing process and how they made it authentic and brought Marmite into that process and all that sort of stuff. So a good story for both brands involved in that partnership. Same here, to celebrate an anniversary for the Cadbury Cream Egg, Goose Island launched a special one-off limited edition cream egg flavored beer. So again, similar to the other one, it got a lot of eyeballs. It's unexpected, but it's a partnership that again, it's about taste. So it sort of feels very authentic for both brands. Here's Gary Barlow. There's a lot of celebrities get involved in booze in terms of creating their own booze. I imagine they get involved in booze generally anyway. And yeah, Gary Barlow put out very recently his own wine label. UB40, I think, have their own red wine, as the song would suggest, but they've got their own collection as well. So you often do get these sort of personality endorsed partnerships as well, where again, on the website for this, Gary Barlow has written about, you know, his love for the process and all this sort of stuff. So they've gone to quite extreme lengths to make it feel authentic, including having the piano keys on the bottle, as opposed to his face. You know, it just feels slightly more subtle, feels slightly more authentic, that sort of stuff. So that's another recent example in terms of alcohol. Here's a fun one with Only Fools and Horses, so BBC Studios and Kimm and Miller. Again, different sauces, the chili sauces that people can buy. And again, it's all about the packaging, recreating an iconic moment or vehicle from the show. And again, there's plenty of shows like Only Fools and Horses that have these sort of dedicated fan bases that are looking for these gifting opportunities. And it's about being creative from a design point of view and making them work. Again, Scottish FA and GM Spirits, they've partnered up for a range of alcohol as well. And again, it feels very authentic to both the brand, which is something that's very important to the Scottish FA. And again, lots of sports teams and stuff like that you'll see have embraced these sort of partnerships as well. And this is something that Ian can talk about later on, because Ian is firmly involved in this deal, but this was a partnership between Aardman and Dean's on different biscuits and stuff like that. So again, the artwork is fun and smart. The actual, it feels authentic, because Wallace and Gromit as a brand and as a sort of the movies and the animations, biscuits and that sort of stuff is firmly front and center as part of that brand. So again, it's a really smart way, and I don't just say this because Ian's staring at me right now. It's a very, very smart way of sort of bringing a really authentic part of that brand to life in a way that sort of works very well for Dean's, and also is a nice brand booster for Wallace and Gromit. Joe and Seth's, in terms of popcorn, just another category that's embraced licensing. So they've gone sort of quite broad in terms of they've got Budweiser flavored popcorn, which you can imagine tastes like Budweiser. But they've also done character-based partnerships as well. So they've got a partnership with Bond and 007. And again, the direction they've gone with that is martini, dry martini flavored. So there are lots of brands that you sort of think, could you take a character, a spy, make it work in something like popcorn? There are these routes there are these avenues, and especially with the new film, it's a smart way to keep the brand awareness going. And also, I know that the James Bond Joe and Seth's has been given out in terms of lots of influencing campaigns. I think at the premiere they were there on every seat and things like that. So there's those sort of opportunities that sometimes come hand in hand with this sort of stuff. And again, lots of restaurant chains are doing licensing deals to bring the experience of the restaurant into people's homes through these sort of kits. So Wagamama and All About Food recently launched this line. I think it launched exclusively in Waitrose at the start, and then it's expanded out. But again, you'll see this with Pizza Express and TGI Fridays, and lots of restaurant chains are now embracing these sort of kits and these sort of at-home cooking experiences. Again, another one just to sort of highlight the sort of vast breadth of different brands getting involved in this space. This is the RHS, and they've done a partnership with Biscuiteers on a line of gardening and flower-based tins and launches and stuff like that. So again, it isn't just these sort of Marvels and Disneys and Star Wars and Minions and these sort of big film brands that are getting involved in licensing. There really are lots of really smart heritage deals and things like that being done for all sorts of IP. Another quick one in terms of Netflix and Ben & Jerry's. The reason I bring this up is that the development process behind this was quite smart. So when we spoke to the Ben & Jerry's flavor gurus, and that is the job title they officially have, they got the deal for Netflix. They were thinking about how they could make it. And rather than going down maybe obvious route of thinking, well, the logo is red, let's go strawberry, let's do this. They actually did a lot of research alongside Netflix to work out what sort of snacks are people eating when they watch Netflix. And they found that this is mainly in the States, but salted pretzels were one of the things. Salted caramel type stuff is a big thing. Peanut butter type snacks as well. So they fed all of that into the flavor which they created, which they called Netflix and Chilled. So again, from a design point of view, from an R&D point of view, even with stuff like that, where you sort of think, well, there is a potentially an easy route to go with it, there's lots of smart decisions being made about how these brands live in other industries. And this is I think, a really nice example of it. Okay, live experiences and hospitality. This is a huge area at the moment for brands and licensing. This is a shot from inside a brand new experience called Monopoly Life Sized, which is opened in London. It's like a sort of escape room type thing. So every step of the board, you walk into a room and do a challenge based on that step. There is a jail that if you land in jail, there is a physical jail you sit in and things like that. So a very smart experience. In terms of hospitality, Airbnb partnered with KFC to launch this special House of Haaland pop-up that people could book into and stay. And again, there's actually, I don't know if you can see it in here, but there's a button you can press, which is sort of a chicken on demand button. So when you stayed there, anytime you got the feeling for KFC, you could just press the button and it would arrive, 5 minutes later and stuff like that. So fun, smart, quirky pop-ups. This is one. There's a few of these. So another one is Hotel and Nutella, which was in California. So again, they did this sort of very specialist, very limited edition. I think it was only open for a couple of weeks. This hotel experience where all the rooms were themed around Nutella and stuff like that. Scream and Airbnb. Scream has an anniversary coming up, the movie. So what they did for this is they actually rented out the original mansion from the first Scream movie. They recreated some of the elements. So there was sort of knife marks in the wall and lots of other lovely details like that. And then what they also did for people that stayed, they only sold 3 nights. So it was for sort of Scream super fans to book in, is they had a phone and the killer would actually call you like in the film when you pick up and he'd ask you, what's your favorite scary movie and all the other stuff that he says in the film. So fans could have this proper authentic experience. They actually had David Arquette in character through Zoom, did a sort of welcome to the experience type thing as well. So again, this is a really good example. It was only open for 3 nights. So, a maximum of, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 people actually experienced this. But the brand coverage, the brand awareness, all that sort of stuff that came from it, and also the fact there is another Scream movie coming out very soon, it all fed into why this was a smart sort of creative way of bringing a brand to life in sort of a limited edition format. Squid Game is obviously very big on Netflix at the moment. So Netflix are doing all sorts of things to sort of capitalize on that and boost the brand. One of them was this sort of pop-up experience in Koreatown in LA, which was a surprise one done over Halloween. So it was very sort of a bit like in the show, you know, that these cards were given out that sort of gave people a location. People turned up, they checked in like they do in the show, and you could play, albeit less, you know, no one died. There were no very less deadly versions of the games from the show. But again, you could play all the sort of stuff. They had the honeycomb, if you've seen it, they had the honeycomb challenge from the show. So again, these sort of experiences, a bit like what Secret Cinema have done for quite a few years, bringing these brands to life in experiential ways has been it's been a big deal. And this is one where this is called Clue Live in America. It was a walking tour that was run by Hasbro and a company called Right Angle Entertainment. And again, it was about bringing Clue or Cluedo over here to life. So you would, you know, there would be a body, but every location you went in, you would interrogate the suspect. So in this snap, people would actually be asking the character, you know, where were you here? What were you doing with this? Could this be it? And again, the part of this, it launched in New York and LA, and the company wanted to do a walking tour that celebrated the area, celebrated the town, but also brought the brand to life. And that sort of activation, when you think about it, can really happen anywhere. You know, Cluedo doesn't necessarily just have to be in the States. I think there's plenty of places all across the UK and stuff like that could potentially be housing these sort of experiences. So that was another one. Johnnie Walker's launched a store in Edinburgh, but it's very experience-based. They've gone to great lengths to sort of highlight the fact that from the minute you walk in to the minute you leave, it's all about the experience. You can speak to experts, there's tasting sessions. It doesn't look just like a shop. And it's a great example of how these sort of companies, when they are looking at launching bespoke stores now, it's all about the experience and making it something that people are going to want to come back to, share, all that sort of stuff. And the last one on this one is Horrible Histories teamed with Birmingham Stage Company and Silver Fleet to actually do a river tour that also brings the characters to life and brings they've had a lot of success on stage. So they've sort of mashed that up with this river tour in a really smart way that obviously explores the history of the Thames and things like that. So again, another smart brand extension. Homewares and art and decor. So this is Royal Mail and a rug company have created this very cool oversized print here for a rug. There's lots of sort of both incredibly sensible and very left field partnerships in this space. I think this one may be a slightly more on the left field side, but Homesick, which is a sort of a candle company, they partnered with Budweiser to launch this backyard barbecue candle. So again, the aim wasn't that the candle smelt like Budweiser. It was more about them doing research into where is the drink consumed, what is the demographic for Budweiser into, and they brought that sort of barbecue scent to market with Budweiser. So quite a smart, nice creative deal there. National Trust has teamed with the Sarson Stone Group for this sort of tiles that are inspired by the National Trust and sort of various assets and parts of their heritage. So again, a really smart, nice, creative way that brand's been brought to life in an interesting sector. Munchie Play and Mattel, I think this is a nice example of the fact you don't have to be a huge company in terms of you know, to be working, to be doing deals with big brands. So Munchie Play, very, very small startup that's about creating these sort of playful plates. Mattel saw what they were doing, thought there could be a great tie-up with their Thomas and Friends brand. And so they've teamed up to launch this Thomas and Friends line of plates that you can actually, you know, have the train going around the plate and stuff like that. But again, very small creative company paired with a very big, huge brand owner, and they've made it work, and it's been a smart deal, and it's gone really well for both parties. Again, one that Ian's been involved with Nadia Hussain and State of Bliss. So again, celebrities and personalities often are producing homewares and stuff like that, and especially people that have an association with food and baking and cooking and stuff like that. Obviously, whether you're a Jamie Oliver or that sort of personality, they can create these sort of lines which are very authentic to the brand in question. And I'm sure Ian later on will be able to talk about exactly sort of, especially with this brand, how hands-on Nadia is and why it's important to make sure that these sort of things do feel authentic to the person when there are celebrities being involved in this sort of stuff. So that's sort of just an intro. I wanted to sort of get across the sort of breadth of where this space is, where it's going, why it's a very creative space, and hopefully try and get you a bit excited about the potential and the possibilities of what it could be doing potentially for your brand, or if you're a company that wants to work with a brand, why this could be a fun space to play in.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Billy. I appreciate that. That chicken on demand on the KFC activation's pretty wild. I'm gonna pass across to you, Ian, I guess, because you're going to I guess break down how some of the deals are structured, maybe articulate some of the opportunities in this space, and it would be great to hear some of the practical examples you've been involved in across your career, and then we can open up for Q&A if you're okay to.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So Billy's going to operate my slides for me, which is very kind of him. Just to sort of pick up on a couple of the points that Billy made in his overview, one thing I would say as a general point is licensing as a kind of, if you like, a marketing product development methodology is open to all sizes, shapes and forms of companies. And certainly in my experience, licensing has been a platform that a lot of kind of in quotes, smaller companies, startup companies, or challenger companies in sectors have chosen to use licensing as a way of growing their business and accelerating the growth of their business. So as a general observation, I would say I wouldn't be frightened off of licensing if you sort of considered yourself, if you've never done licensing, or you may have a perception that you think that the brand owners wouldn't want to talk to you. I think it's quite the reverse, in that the people that own IP, whether that's directly people like Disney who own their own IP and manage it and license it directly, or other people like the people that we represent who choose to use agents and consultants like ourselves, generally speaking, they're very open to new business conversations, and they're very keen to talk to new companies, because one of the challenges our industry faces is to make sure that we keep growing the sector and growing the size of the participants who are using licensing. So as I say, that's a sort of a general point that I would make after seeing those kind of excellent and thought-provoking examples from Billy. I think it's important that whatever size and shape and form of company you are, don't feel that I couldn't get into licensing because I'm not a big enough company, or I haven't done licensing before. As I say, it's very much the reverse of that. So this is really just a very brief overview of how to kind of think about the, if you like, the structure of licensing. So licensing is very much run by a contract. So there is a contract that's set up between the participants in the licensing agreement. But in very basic terms, I would suggest that you think about licensing as a rental agreement. So you as a manufacturer, a retailer, an artisan, that kind of thing, if you wanted to use an IP that belongs to somebody else, you enter into a licensing agreement, and effectively you're renting that IP for a set period of time. So normally there's a term of contract, and typically that might be 2, 3, 4 years. It will also require that there is some conversation around how you're going to use that IP, and there's a defined use. So it will describe the products, the service, the goods, that kind of thing. Normally you'll get a license for a specific geographical territory. So most often, if you're a UK based company, it will probably be for the UK and Ireland. And if you like, the financial aspect of licensing is very much run around a royalty-based arrangement. And generally speaking, the licensee, that is the manufacturer, the promotional partner, the retailer that's using the IP, will pay a royalty on every item that's sold. And that royalty, again, in general terms, is calculated generally around the wholesale price, so the wholesale price of an item. And you might expect in most categories, like everything, there's differences in different categories of products, but in most categories you might expect to pay a royalty of something like 10% of the wholesale price. So the price that you're selling it to, say, a retailer, and let's say you receive £1 from that particular retailer, you would pay 10 pence of that as a royalty to the intellectual property owner. And from a revenue point of view, that's how the intellectual property owners make their money. It's very much from royalty income. Here, really, what the sort of point I'd like to sort of get across is it's, again, one of the, if you like, the common misconceptions about licensing is that it's just about children's characters. So that tends to be driven by the fact that, most often if you go into, say, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, and you look at a popular category like apparel, probably one of the biggest kind of examples and uses of licensing within, say, an apparel category is you see children's characters featuring. So at the moment, you would see a lot of Disney characters on pajamas, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and you would see characters like Peppa Pig on similar products. So what that tends to mean in our world is that a lot of people regard licensing as just about children's products and children's characters. And again, as Billy's slides, I think, demonstrated, it's a very diverse world with a myriad of sources of intellectual property and different types of rights. So, for example, in my own agency, these are just a few of the rights that we represent. So we work with the University of Oxford and represent the Ashmolean Museum. And the Ashmolean Museum is the world's oldest free-to-attend public museum, and it's got something like 1 million+ artifacts. And they've chosen to go into licensing for 2 or 3 main reasons. One is, quite frankly, to develop and raise money, because like many heritage companies, they're under pressure from a financial point of view. But for them, another reason to go into licensing is they want to bring the museum alive outside of the museum. And so, for example, if they have, rather like the Van Gogh examples that Billy showed, if they have a line of products that goes into, say, a fashion retailer, or say a fashion t-shirt that features one of their artworks, it's a new way of engaging with consumers, and it's a new way of getting people to appreciate the art and the collection. And from their point of view, it doubles up as a marketing platform, because someone may see a design on a t-shirt and that will inspire them to go to the museum to see that original piece of artwork. So it's a kind of a marketing tool for them from that point of view. We work with the TV personality Nadia Hussain, and Billy showed you one of the examples from Bliss Home. Nadia is a very good example of a personality where, in a way, licensing has been forced upon her, in the sense that, by that, what I mean is that because she's become popular, noteworthy, and she's a personality with an opinion, she's had a lot of commercial approaches from companies who want to work with her. So a lot of what we do on behalf of Nadia is actually pick and choose what to do and advise her about what we think are the most appropriate products for her to be involved in, but also the most appropriate companies for her to work with, because very much as Billy suggested, Nadia is all about being hands-on and being authentic, and she wants to be involved in the development process of these products. So we've got probably 6 companies we work with, and the most recent one is a company that's going to be doing cookware, so very high-end pots and pans for the kitchen. But what Nadia wanted to do when she worked in that sector wasn't just to take a product that you could buy off the shelf in a factory in the Far East. She wanted to work with the manufacturer to develop a very specific range from scratch that reflected her knowledge and insight into that product category, and added a certain amount of flair and knowledge from her side to the actual production. So it's very much a bespoke product. And again, just thinking in terms of your own businesses, often one of the things that interests intellectual property owners is the ability to work with a company that has got a bespoke approach to manufacturing and development, and is also prepared to allow them to get involved in the product development side. And sort of coupled with that is the fact that they're looking all the time for new and innovative ideas to kind of get into new markets, but also to be working in consumer markets that are emerging and developing. We also look after classic things like from the animation world, like WALLACE and GROMIT. And again, what we find in our world is that independent animation companies look to licensing as a way of generating revenues, because again, in very simple terms, what's happened in the TV world is the production budgets have gone down. So independent production companies in particular have to find new ways of raising money to fund new productions. So licensing is one way of doing that. So that means, again, that there's lots of classic TV characters, TV series that are interested in licensing and interested in ideas to bring their characters alive in the product world. And I just thought, for obvious reasons, I would also mention that we work with DC Thomson currently on the Bruins and WULLIE, and I think that's a really good example of how a heritage brand can survive outside of its core area, in this case newspaper comic strips, and have a second and third life through licensing and activations. This slide is just really to reflect on what the benefits for companies like yourselves might be in terms of using licensing. Again, particularly thinking about younger companies, startup companies, challenger companies in sectors, what it can do is it gives you access to a ready-made brand and design. So if you think about some of the examples that Billy showed, the companies who are involved with those products and services, they've been able to access, in some cases, brands that exist on a global basis and have maybe 100 years of history, and they've been able to harness the strength of those brands to create their own products, and that gives them, a lot of momentum in the marketplace. By definition, most successful and established license programs or intellectual property will have an established consumer audience. So you're actually talking to a fan base, a consumer base that's actually engaged with that intellectual property. And increasingly what we're seeing is that it's becoming even more relevant in the online world, where we're seeing more and more examples of companies using digital marketing and e-commerce to sell their products. If you can work with an intellectual property brand that has a consumer audience and has a social media audience, that kind of thing, it gives you, a very real audience and a consumer base to work with and to work in a collaborative way. You also become part of a bigger brand family. Seldom would you be the only licensee. You would probably be the only licensee in your particular category, but you would be joining a group of other people who are also licensing that particular brand. And by kind of joining forces, one becomes two and two becomes four, and you create a real sense of momentum. So, if you go into a retailer at the moment and you see some of the ranges that are being placed for Christmas, for example, you might see multiple types of products from different areas, whether that's stationery, giftware, candles, etc. And they might all, the common bond is the intellectual property that they're featuring, but they may have been supplied by 5 or 6 different companies. But what happens is the retailer particularly kind of curates those suppliers, and you become part of that group. So it leads on to additional opportunities. Related to that is that you then have access to a retail network. So often what people in licensing on the manufacturing side like about it is that they can engage with retail buyers, and retail buyers in certain cases are very receptive to intellectual property licensing and are actively seeking licensing opportunities. So for many companies, licensing is a key that unlocks the retail door sometimes. So that's a big advantage. It also creates fantastic PR and social media opportunities. Billy mentioned about Marmite. I mean, Marmite, the licensing of Marmite is very much driven by the owner, Unilever. But I know I've worked with Unilever before, and I know one of the reasons that they do licensing and brand extension with Marmite is because it generates a huge amount of PR and social media coverage for them. So it's for the brand Marmite, but also that licensee will be benefiting from that. So Joe and Cephs, which is the popcorn company that Billy showed, they did a Marmite popcorn as well, and that was something that that generated them coverage in national newspapers, national media, which then obviously has a positive benefit back to their core business as well. One thing to reflect on as well is that it should allow you to create a unique product or offer that your competitors can't replicate. So for argument's sake, if you're Joe and Cephs, the popcorn people, and you're developing Budweiser popcorn, there won't be anybody else in the market who will be developing Budweiser popcorn. So that gives you a very distinct competitive advantage and gives you something that, again, coming back to retailers, something that retailers have to come to you to get because they can't get it anywhere else. So again, that gives you a strength in the market. And licensing, finally, another benefit for companies is that it can open up international distribution for you. Generally, a lot of the licenses that are available have an international aspect to them. So if you developed a product in the UK, there would potentially be opportunities for distribution to get that product into other territories. And again, that's a success for that particular product, but that can help you build your business in a general sense as well. So I'm going to just show now a few examples of some of the properties that we've worked on in recent times and how they've been brought alive in the licensing market. Many of you may have seen some of this particular example, which is, this is an example from the WULLIE bucket trail, which DC Thompson did a couple of years ago in association with a company called Wild in Art. And it was a public art trail. So these art figures were decorated by individual artists and illustrators. They were sponsored by brands. Many major Scottish brands got involved in it. And the buckets were put out in different towns around Scotland, and it was effectively a walking trail that people could go out and see them. And I think this is a good example of how a well-known, in this case, character property can be used in the kind of the leisure sector, the heritage sector, to actually bring an opportunity alive. In this case, it really galvanized the individual towns and cities that the trail took place in. It was linked to charity. It raised a substantial amount of money for charity, but it kind of shows how licensing can have an impact on a community and can have an impact in the live experience area as well. This is another example with WULLIE where, in this case, we've teamed up with a street artist called Sleek. So Sleek is established in his own right as an artist. He's got a certain audience that buy his work, both originals and prints. He wanted to broaden that audience and to reach a new audience, and also work with kind of gallery operators to get some of his work, for want of better words, into a more mainstream situation. So he took a license with DC Thompson to develop his own version and vision of WULLIE and the Bruins. And by doing that, he's now got his work into a different sort of part of the retail market. He's interacting with different consumers, and he's opened up some different distribution opportunities. So on the right-hand side, some of you may recognize this. This is a collaboration that he's done in Dundee with the two Dundee football teams. So he's done a Dundee United version and a Dundee version. And what that's done is that's given him a product and a group of products that he can sell to the football supporting community through the club shops and the club's websites and so on. So that's an example of how, in a very pinpoint targeted way, you can develop a product for a particular audience, and that can kind of develop a new distribution opportunity for you. This is a further example of WULLIE where we worked with a company called We Are One of 100. We Are One of 100 specialize in developing kind of collaborations, limited edition collaborations with artists and illustrators. We approached them about would they be interested in using some of the original Dudley D. Watkins artwork of WULLIE, which is on the right-hand side. They were very excited about the opportunity because a lot of what they do is they work with contemporary artists. They felt it would be appropriate for them to work with a heritage artist, and it would be a way of, for them, potentially connecting with some new consumers, but also in their case, I think it's a celebration of you know, an artist that has a great reputation and a character that has a great status in Scotland. And for them, it was, I think, a great selling opportunity, but it was also a really good PR opportunity. And they developed 100 T-shirts on the right-hand side. They're all hand printed, so each of the 100 are hand printed, and they all have a little button on them with an individual number 1 to 100, and they're put on sale, and you as a consumer can request. I might request number 99, and if 99 is available, I can get that. And the 100 T-shirts that they did, which were £35 each, the 100 T-shirts sold out within 3 hours of going on sale. So again, I think what that sort of demonstrates is how a relatively small company can use licensing to create a really big, dramatic impact at retail. This is an example. We work with. I work with gardeners on the brooms in WULLIE, but as a company, again, many of you may know them. Gardeners are based in Scotland. They're a manufacturer of fudge, so they do a load of sort of standard fudge that they sell through the tourist market to supermarkets, independent gift outlets. But what they wanted to do was give themselves a competitive edge in a competitive marketplace. So a few years ago, they alighted on licensing. And one aspect of what they've done in licensing is they've teamed up with alcohol brands like Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, Bailey's, and produced flavored fudge. Much of it is in gift boxes or gift tins. And what that's done is that's allowed them to have a unique product in a busy, competitive space. And it's opened up new distribution for them in places like tourist outlets, in better times in duty free, but it's also given them international business opportunities. So a lot of these products are exported to other markets. And it's a really good example of they're the only people who do Jim Beam fudge. Nobody else can do it. So if a retailer wants to stock that product, they have to work with gardeners because they're the licensed supplier of that product. This is an example of something we've done very recently with a company called Urban Pup, who are based over in Northern Ireland. And again, this is an example of a company that's in quite a competitive area. So pet accessories, specifically dog sweaters and dog jackets, is quite it's a boom area. So if any of you've got any pet dogs, you're probably aware of the fact that there is a kind of a rapidly growing industry for pet wear, pet accessories. But again, one of the challenges that manufacturers like Urban Pup face in that is how do they stand out from the crowd, and how do they make a point of difference in a very competitive market? Because if everyone's doing quilted jackets, ultimately it might be about pricing, availability, advertising. But because they are now doing a dedicated Wallace and Gromit range, that gives them a unique play in the market. Nobody else can do this. But the other thing that's worked really well for them, they only launched a couple of weeks ago, but the first week they launched, they did a PR campaign with Ardman. Ardman, who own Wallace and Gromit, worked with them to develop a consumer PR campaign. And it generated a huge amount of publicity for them in national papers, which worked really well to sell the product itself, but obviously worked well to drive traffic to Urban Pup's website. And they built up a relationship with a new group. Yeah, sorry, Alex, go ahead, ask her.
Yeah, apologies, Ian. I'm slightly conscious of time there.
Yeah,
fascinating stuff. But I wanted to just, because you guys have touched upon this already, and we've got a few questions coming in, and it would be great to field to you both while we have your expertise here. I guess one of the things we talked about before we came on, it went live, was about the infrastructure of the Highlands and Islands, the type of business, and the idea of this unique global provenance that many of them have. And we've got a question from a fantastic multi-award-winning independent publisher based up here called Sandstone Press, and they're asking, do you have any tips for how brands with smaller followings can work within the licensing space?
Yeah, I mean, if the question is about your own intellectual property, as in you might have your own artwork or your own brand that you're looking to license out, I think one of the key things is to be very clear and focused on what makes that brand special and unique. And I think related to that is sort of understanding your audience, so who's buying into that brand in its core form, who your consumers are, where you're selling it, what maybe some of the sales stats are behind it. So it's about really knowing what you're trying to license, really, and bringing that alive for people, because what you're then trying to do is you're trying to engage with other people who obviously don't know your brand as well as you do, and what you're trying to do is kind of get them excited about it. But I think one key point there is making it easy for them to understand what's the commercial advantage to them of using your brand. And again, I think, that is a very good example of how companies can use licensing in that way, where they may have some intellectual property themselves, and what working in licensing may allow them to get into product categories that perhaps they wouldn't want to do themselves, they don't feel comfortable about, or they don't have the experience in. So, classically, you see lots of publishers will end up working with calendar companies, for example, or they'll work with stationery companies, and that gets them into a related area. That's the other thing I'd say very briefly is think about what are those other product categories, and it's more likely that they're going to be products that are closer to the core product, first of all, than products that are a long way away. So if you're a publisher and you're doing lots of sales in bookshops, it may be that the next logical step to go into are other products that bookshops sell. So whether that's calendars, notebooks, jigsaw puzzles, that kind of thing.
And the only thing I'd very quickly add just on that as well would be maybe also playing to your strengths in terms of, we saw a deal recently with a publisher that did a lot of sort of guide to life type books and quote books, inspirational quotes. And they recently partnered with Netflix on doing an Ozark book that took one of the characters from Ozark, and it was her guide to life. And she's quite a spiky character in the show. And again, I imagine, there might be a couple of Ozark publishing deals out there, but they managed to find an area where they could go, look, we can provide this sort of book for your brand that no one else can. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I guess as a slight follow-up to that, we have another question asking. So, what about the mechanical process? How would a smaller independent company maybe make an approach into this space? I mean, what would a partnership look like? What's the expectation on either side? Is it a fertile space? Would bigger partners be open to an approach from smaller companies?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, in my experience, the vast majority of intellectual property owners are receptive to new business opportunities. I think what you would be thinking about is how you present yourself to that intellectual property owner. So I think that's about demonstrating your company's capabilities, experience, what marketplace you operate in, what your products are, what your possibly what your USPs are, and then you effectively present yourself to those companies. I mean, like many industries, licensing has a series of kind of network opportunities to meet people. So next week, for example, is the Brand Licensing Europe show in London, and that's our big trade show where it's the opportunity for people like ourselves to showcase what we do, and what we're always hoping is that we meet new companies. But generally speaking, I think if you have have a product and you feel you want to work with an intellectual property owner, I think it's a case of knocking on the right door and just engaging in a conversation. And it may be, I don't want to do them a disservice, it may be difficult to say work with Disney from day one, because they've got, they're the market leader, they've got loads of people who are working with them. But there's plenty of other people, I think, who would be happy to engage in a conversation. And again, not as a sales plug for myself particularly, but if anybody on this call wanted to pursue a licensing opportunity, obviously we've got things we would like to license to people, but I'm very happy to help point people in the right direction and help where I can to kind of make a connection. And that really is a key thing about licensing. It's very much a networking business.
Fantastic. I will say at this point, Billy actually runs a fantastic digital platform for the global licensing industry, full of really helpful resources and lots of information. And I think what we'll maybe do as well, guys, hopefully going forward, is that we will hopefully collaboratively develop some resources for our networks that can move over this in more detail. A similar one for this, that we have another question is, do you guys, either of you, happen to have an example of how a small business manages a relationship with larger brands? Because there's a concern here that someone's raised about, obviously that could be slightly imbalanced, if you like. So do you guys have a practical example you could share with us quickly?
I would just say, I mentioned in my sort of overview that all licensing agreements are based around a contract, And often, you kind of think of a contract being a one-way street, but in fact, a licensing contract is very much about setting out the rules of engagement for both parties. I think there's a long history of smaller companies working with so-called bigger companies. And I think what the bigger company, in terms of the intellectual property owner, is attracted to is the fact that those smaller companies are nimble, entrepreneurial, and are bringing new and fresh ideas to the table. But I think you shouldn't be scared off by the fact you might perceive yourself to be a smaller operator and you're going to engage with a bigger operator, because I think last thing I would say is that in many cases, one of the reasons that these bigger or so-called bigger companies engage in licensing and use licensing to kind of market their intellectual property is because they don't want to be involved in those areas. They actually want to work with manufacturers who are experts in those categories.
Fantastic. I think that brings us very neatly bang on time. We do have a couple of other questions. If you guys are happy to take them, we could probably run over a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
One actually is around best sources of information to see what licensing and partnerships are being created. Billy, I've posted your website into our chat, and I think as a bit of continuity, we'll maybe do a follow-up to this session in some format, which we can make available to our networks. But quickly, is there any other places that we live in an environment where people can get more information easier than ever? Is there any you'd recommend?
Yeah, so so our Brands Untapped, like I say, we're sort of focusing on the design, the creativity, and covering those deals and getting under the skin of the deals. So a lot of stuff, while we do have news, we also have a lot of interviews and stuff. So yeah, do check us out, and we do a weekly newsletter. That'd be great. In terms of other stuff, there's things like License Global, do a big magazine sort of that covers all the news and has all the big releases. The trade body is called Licensing International. So they're worth checking out because they'll have a news base and they're the sort of official trade body for the industry. Licensing Source is another one that covers news and stuff like that. There's quite a few. And like I say, it's tricky because it's next week, but BLE, Brand Licensing Europe in London. There's also a big show in Vegas that takes place earlier in the year, normally every year. But those sort of shows are also great if you wanted to just, go and check out, have chats with people, see what brands are there and are able to talk to. And they also
I'll just sort of add to what Billy said, that Brand Licensing Europe, if you can't make it to London next week, they do have quite a lot of content online. So they're doing quite a lot of seminars online. And, after that, the live event, they're going to do a virtual event as well. So there may be some opportunities there. But I think it's also an industry where, as I mentioned, it's a network industry. So if you make contact with somebody, Billy's very good at doing this. I like to think I'm quite good at doing it. If you talk to us, we would try to help you. And if it's not something that we can do directly, generally we will know someone who might be able to help you or is a more appropriate person for you to talk to.
And Brands Untapped, which is an awesome resource, you also have a running list of events that are, and I noticed this morning that lots of them are virtual, so geography becomes much less of a barrier. Fantastic. I think we're going to wrap it up there. We're a bit over time, so apologies for that, but can't thank you guys enough. Hugely insightful session, and it would be great to follow up in any way that we can. I'd just like to draw everyone's attention to the final workshop we have in this package of content, designing the strategic partnerships, is same time next week, and then I've popped a little link into the chat for anyone. Guys, thanks so much for your time. We hugely appreciate it. And as I said, hopefully we can get you guys to take any follow-up. If we can, we'd be incredibly useful. And I know we've discussed various partnership options going forward, so that's incredibly exciting too. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.